Hello, St. John Baptist Church, Al McClaney with the weekly stewardship video. We're going to continue on from last week's video where we were talking about making a checklist to go into 2021. So we are closing the books on 2020. It's quickly approaching. We're mid-December. Wishing you all a Merry Christmas as that's just around the corner, and a Happy New Year. But before we go into that new year, let me go ahead and read the disclaimer before we get into the video. No advice should be seen as a recommendation, as I'm not a licensed financial advisor, and this is for educational purposes only, because in this video I will be, as I often do, mention some specific ETFs and stocks. But once again, always do your own research. See if it fits your financial plan or your goals. So before we close out 2020, I was on a video conference with my dad. And I mentioned before in prior videos, he's part of the 4D Trading Institute, in which they are a trading community that trades futures. And they were doing their closeout for the year. And Tim Lewis, who's the founder and president, had some of his trading partners talk about reflecting on 2020 and what they learned. And one of the things that they were talking about is, first, each one of them in the community reflect on your 2020 and what did you learn. And then second, learning to be flexible and fluid with the environment. Not just throwing up your hands and giving up, but learning from it. And then something that our pastor always says, half the battle is showing up and being persistent. So this thing that we talk about in these videos, stewardship, about markets, you may not understand it right now, but just keep persistent, keep at it. And some of you may even say, at the beginning of these videos, a lot of things you said, Al, were Greek to me, but now I'm speaking Greek. So part of it, and just remember, I didn't start with a skill of already knowing stewardship, because unfortunately a lot of this is not taught in schools. So I had a learning curve and continue to learn. So what you want to do is reflect on 2020. And Deacon Rodney Johnson said this in one of our Bible studies, which, by the way, you can always join the men Tuesday night in a Bible study. We've shut down for the year. We'll pick it back up in 2021. But one of the things he talked about is don't miss this. And what he was saying is that for 2020, there are things that we have learned, some habits we picked up that we want to continue, some things that we stopped that we want to continue stopping those. And I give you an example. For me and my wife, Janine, eating out. We've shut that down, and that's one of the habits we want to continue, because we were spending way too much money eating out. So some of you have started budgeting. I saw a news article the other day that says that America is at one of its highest savings rates. That's probably another habit that we all want to continue the steady saving. Now, I'm going to talk about that when we get into the slides, that there is going to be pent-up demand of people wanting to spend that money. And part of it is that Santa Claus rally that I talked about last week. So Rodney Johnson, and I agree with this, don't miss this for this year. So either Rodney was ahead of his time, or Ron Emanuel, who used to be the mayor of Chicago, was quoting Rodney Johnson, because Ron Emanuel said, don't let any crisis go to waste. And what he means is learn from that. So either Ron was quoting Rodney was ahead of his time, and brilliant as I think he is anyway. So let's take a look at mindset, because I think that's where it starts. We talked about the checklist last week, and I'm going to show you that resource again that I'm still willing to email you, but it all starts with your mindset. 2 Corinthians 10 verses 3-5 in the Amplified Bible says, for though we walk in the flesh as mortal men, we are not carrying on our spiritual warfare according to the flesh and using the weapons of man. The weapons of our warfare are not physical, weapons of flesh and blood. Our weapons are divinely powerful for the destruction of fortresses. We are destroying sophisticated arguments and every exalted and proud thing that sets itself up against the true knowledge of God. We are taking every thought and purpose captive to the obedience of Christ. And Deacon Greg Rudin says everything's spiritual. You know, everything is spiritual. And I've heard some pastors say we're spiritual beings having a physical experience. We're spiritual beings having a physical experience. So you can see here in my caption, a cartoon, we've got the person about to destroy something. And then, so in my mind, I see us destroying those arguments that are against anything that is biblical. That means even these habits we may have learned that go against biblical principles about avoiding debt, saving, investing is a biblical principle. Making sure we have a plan, and we've gone over those different scriptures, specifically in Proverbs, where it talks about those biblical principles. Let's destroy those secular ideas and then drag anything, I've got it towing to the knowledge of God. So what we're doing is destroying those arguments that are secular and are counter to the biblical financial principles we're learning, and we're dragging those into the knowledge of God. So we're taking those thoughts and purpose captive to the obedience of Christ. So we're moving our thoughts and our way of dealing with our finances into a stewardship, which starts with, of course, foundationally that God is the owner, but we're the stewards and we follow his direction. So it's a mindset. So our values are what we believe, mindset is what we think, and then we should act it out in the behaviors of what we do. So we should value, of course, the biblical principles. We should value the Lord as owner in our hearts. Our mindset should be wanting to follow his way of doing things and then act that out. I love what it says in Romans 12, verses 1 through 2 in the Message Bible. So here's what I want you to do. God helping you take your everyday, ordinary life, your sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for him. Here's the part I emphasize. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. And that's what we're talking about. Values, the heart, the mindset, and then act out in behaviors. Readily recognize that what he wants you to do from you and quickly respond to it. Unlike the culture around you, always dragging you down to its level of immaturity, God brings the best out of you, develops well-informed maturity in you. So it starts with our mindset. So on our checklist, maybe that's what you want to also include. Then I also found a couple of things out on Instagram that I thought maybe could help form our mindsets. There's a couple of them. Buy more assets, less crap, and grow your gap. You're not broke. You just spend your money on things that don't earn you money. So that's a mindset. You know, is there something, is that a need or desire? Is it something I really need or something I desire? And God will bless us with our needs and desires. But sometimes our desires pushes over into things like debt. And here's the second one. It says no holiday should manipulate you to the point where you're going into debt just to show someone you love them. That's sometimes what our desires do. Our needs, we want to make sure those are met, and God definitely meets our needs, but he'll also give us desires of our heart. So sometimes what we also need to do is go back and adjust our mindset so that we're looking in line with what God wants for us. And then the next one, I love this one. It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken adults. So that's the other thing we talked about leaving a legacy and living a legacy. And the living a legacy, leaving a legacy, we talked about those in the previous videos, that as you're on this journey as an adult, make sure we're reaching back and teaching your children or even your grandchildren or anyone you see around, because the stronger they are from a stewardship standpoint, the less broken they will be or broke in the future. It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken adults. So here's a reminder of the resource that I offered last week. Again, I pay for this Sound Mind Investing. It's about $100 a year, but I have a PDF of this one, which every year I pay attention to. It comes out in December, and it says your 10 most important financial moves for 2021. The previous video, if you want to look, I gave some more details of this issue where it lists about 60 things you can do, and you use it like a checklist, check off what you're going to do. The recommendation is 10 things you want to do, and you may want to include things like mindset, that you want to make sure you reach down to the generation ahead of you or behind you. So if you just email me at no charge, I'm going to send this PDF to you, and it's about 7 to 8 pages, and you can just use it like a checklist. So that's a_McClaney@yahoo.com. And here's another resource as I start to transition, we start to get ready to talk about the markets. IBD Weekly, and that stands for Investor Business Daily Weekly. So these are getting hard to find. It's a newspaper that comes out once a week. It's about $6, and they're great ideas. If you just read that once a week, or maybe every 2 weeks you go and buy one and just read through it, it's going to give you some ideas about stocks, about mutual funds, exchange traded funds, ETFs. It will help you in your education. Now, these are getting harder and harder to find. So if you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I found them at Barnes & Noble, but it's specific Barnes & Noble. In Addison, I found these. They're, again, getting harder and harder to find. If it's difficult, now you can do the subscription, and there's a cost to that. I don't know if they do many paper versions anymore. You can do it digitally, but at no cost. Most libraries take these. And I know with COVID, you want to be careful, but once a week, you can go in and just pick it up and read it and maybe make notes on that, and that won't cost you anything. So IBD Weekly, that's a great resource. So as we start to go into the market, I've been telling you for the last couple of weeks that the earnings will start to die out as we leave earnings seasons. And you can see here for the week of December 21st, not a lot going on. CarMax and Paychecks. I mean, so we're definitely, even next week, we may not have anything on this, and then we'll pick it back up again, of course, in January as they start to report again, because we'll be have closed out the year and closed out fourth quarter. But just looking at this gave me an idea. CarMax, one of the stocks you may look at is Carvana, which is disruptive now to the used car, where you actually don't even meet with a salesman. You go online, and it's a whole new way of purchasing a vehicle. That stock, I looked at it, it's already had a tremendous rise. I think it's about $293 or $223. But what you want to look at is the principle behind it. What are some industries or some companies out there that are disrupting the industry and could be innovative? So once again, these are not meant as recommendations, but just to form a foundation to inspire you and give you an idea of maybe this could be something I can invest in, or find some mutual funds that cover that particular area, or we talked about exchange traded funds. And with that said, here's a couple of other ideas you may want to work through. Once again, see if it fits your particular financial plan. So I started talking about this trust, which is the symbol GBTC, and this is in Bitcoin. And you can see what a run this has gone on since the beginning of the year, and now it's at its high of $29.48. I know some of you say, oh man, it's made a huge run. There's still probably time to get in this. I've been reading a lot of things. I don't know specifically about Bitcoin itself, but I can understand a trust that invests in it. I'm learning, and that's one of my goals in 2021, to learn more about Bitcoin, because it looks like this is not just some whim, that it's here to stay. And there are a lot of industries that are now taking Bitcoin. So if you're not specifically collecting Bitcoin, again, and I am nowhere near knowledgeable about it, but I'm learning about it, this is a way, an easy way to play in that move. So GBTC, you may want to look at. And as I said, this has moved, and there's probably still some room to continue. Another one we talked about last week, looking at an industry that you think because of COVID was beaten up. The low for this ETF, which is JETS, which is airline industry exposure, was $12. The move has only gone to $22.53. The high is 32. Even if it just recovers to where it used to be, that's a $10 move. That may be something you look at. And this is not looking at one specific company. This is, again, an ETF. So you got less exposure of like a Delta, going bankrupt on you. But this may be something you look at doing. And this kind of reminds me to talk about the Santa Claus rally and pent up demand. I told you that right now, households are saving at a record rate because people don't have anything to do. A lot of people have cut out, things like my wife and I, Janine, going out to eat. So savings is growing, things get hit. Well, that's going to be pent up, surplus capital that people want to spend. We may see it in a Santa Claus rally, which is, just simply saying this is where a lot of people money saved up and they're spending it at the retail, at the stores, or e-commerce. You see the Amazon trucks all over the place. When that happens, that usually affects the market, and stocks also go up. That's the Santa Claus rally, and we're right in that zone on where we could start seeing it happen. That same analogy can be made for next year. People have this pent up, amount of money. We know the Pfizer vaccine at the time of this recording had been approved, and they're actually being people vaccinated right now. Moderna just got approved as we were making this video. So they were saying, as soon as 4 or 5 days into the week of Christmas, that people could be receiving that vaccination. We'll be the only country that has 2 options available, Pfizer and Moderna. As people get vaccinated and we get to that 70%, that magical number of where we've got immunity nationwide, people are going to start to get out, want to travel, want to go to resorts, maybe Disney. I mean, those are the type of things where you look at industries that have been beat up because of COVID, and maybe you consider investing in it. And JETS was one of them. The other thing, with the change of administration, that President-elect Joe Biden, Kamala Harris are going into office, you may be looking at a play based on who's in office. First Solar is a company, of course, in the alternative energy. It's made a big run, but you may find others along with it that you may consider investing. So that's called like a presidential play, where you're looking at who's in the office. It means that they could be driving that particular industry. Another one I didn't put in here could be infrastructure. And I had that represent, this is not a specific infrastructure exchange traded fund. And by the way, this is a specific company, not a exchange traded fund. That's First Solar FSLR, but XLB is, and that's XLB is an ETF, exchange traded fund, where this may be, you're looking at playing the infrastructure. For years, they've been talking about we need to get an infrastructure bill. This may be the year that it gets done. As I know, President-elect Joe Biden has really been talking about we need to, infrastructure. The fact that Pete Buttigieg is being considered for Department of Transportation Secretary. I think a mayor, former mayor, would know potholes better than anybody. So, fixing the roads. We've got an electric grid that is way out of date in most states and counties. There's airport renovations that need to happen. So this could be a way of playing that XLB. Again, once again, do your own research. And the way I found this particular one is I used a company I knew, Vulcan Materials, which was from my home city, Birmingham, Alabama. And the symbol is VMC. And I've told you before, you can go out to a website called etfdb.com. That's ETF deltabravo.com, etfdb.com, and you can put in like a company you know, and it'll give you the exchange traded funds that have exposure to that. Or you could do the opposite way. You can go into like XLB, you can type in that symbol, and you'll see Vulcan Materials comes up. And so you can do the opposite and look and see, well, maybe I want to do those specific companies. So several different ways. The important part is have a plan and participate in this market. So with that, I didn't do the SPY or QQQ like I normally do, or the more large range scope market. We'll do that next week. But basically, there's not a lot of change from last week. The market continues to trend up with a little dip when the news came about not getting a COVID deal done, stimulus deal, but that's as I'm doing this video, looks like that's going to be happening with direct checks. And if the market gets that, then we'll see even more built into the Santa Claus rally. As people have checks to spend, you'll see that in the market as not the pandemic, but as the vaccine makes its way through. That'll be another reason for optimism in the market. And I firmly believe, and a lot of people believe this too, once President-elect Biden and Kamala Harris are in office, they'll be pushing for another stimulus for next year. So right now, the signs look good. So be careful watching the news, because that'll have you jaded. But right now, a lot of things look good when it comes to the direction of the market. Now, the economy, of course, that could, different. We talked about that before. But right now, from a market standpoint, a lot of areas of opportunity are out there. So as always, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel by just doing a search under my name, Al McClaney, and then you can set it up to where when the video is loaded, which is usually on Saturday, at the latest Sunday, I load the new one for that week, you'll get an alert. And that way you can also go back and look at the archives of all the videos that are out there. And I've tried to label them, what's the main thing I'm describing or talking about in that video. So as always, St. John Baptist Church and others who now are viewing, remember that God is Lord and owner, but we play the important role of his steward, which means we manage his resources. So everyone have a Merry Christmas, and we'll of course do a video before the new year. But if you don't view this, have a merry, safe Christmas and a happy new year. And remember that we celebrate because Jesus, who became our plan for salvation, was born.